Is this a work session?
It is.
Okay, so the work session for Planning Commission, July 22nd, 2013 is called to order. So we're going to start this evening with the Oregon City Sign Code update.
You have to move the microphone closer to you.
All right. Thank you. My name is Laura Turway. I'm a planner with the city. I'm here to just give you an update on our sign code update project. So, as you know, it was one of the city commission goals to update our sign code. We haven't made any significant changes in our sign code for over 20 years. And so we are working with the public over the next year to try and figure out what the citizens and businesses of Oregon City would like for sign regulations. And for sign regulations, I'm talking about signs on private property primarily, not city street signs. It would be A-frame signs, we could do right-of-way signs in the public right-of-way as well, signs on the wall, murals, banners, standalone signs like for Oregon City Shopping Center, the nice City Hall sign out here. And this is going to be quite a big project. We're already starting to meet with neighborhood associations to let them know what we're doing. We're trying to get as much public input as possible. This project is only successful if we get a lot of input from a wide variety of interests in the city. So we have a website that's up and running, which is ocsigncode.org. One of our pages is highlighted. That's our homepage. So we're going to be continuously updating our website. Every meeting we go to, we have notes. We post the notes on our website. You can go on the website and make comments about what you would or would not like to see in Oregon City. Also, you want to figure out if there's places where we would like some signage, but is not appropriate for other types of signage in Oregon City.
Here we come. We're sorry.
No, you're not.
And
Okay.
we have a little bit of help with this project. We have 2 consultants, Enviro Issues and Herbsworks as well. So they'll be helping with the public facilitation and writing some potential sign code. So right now we are in the initial phase of the project where we just want to let everybody know what we're doing. We want to start to recruit members for our citizen team. We are putting together a team that's going to be appointed by the mayor, and yes, there is a position for planning commission on this team, so you can start to think about which one of you would like to be working on our sign code project. The team will be 10 to 12 members. We have certain positions that we want to fill to make sure that we have an even-handed team. So we'll have sign representatives, some representatives from schools or churches, residents, businesses, sign manufacturers, historic review board, and so forth. All of this is posted again on our website, ocsigncode.org. So we are accepting applications to sit on the citizen committee, and we would like to have them into our website by August 16th. You can submit there right online. There's a couple of questions like which position are you applying for and what are your past qualifications and so forth. We will have the mayor appoint the positions at the end of August, and then September we're going to be started with our first meeting. There's going to be a total of 4 meetings on the citizen committee. There'll be one every month between September and December. And with those meetings, we will have a recommendation to staff on what we like in our sign code, what we want to change in our sign code. So they'll really take a look at what everyone has said in our meetings, at our online, and the representatives from the CAT teams, what we're calling it, will put together a package. And if there's some issues, we can't come to agreements on, we'll put that in there as well. And they'll make that recommendation to city staff. City staff will put together a final list of code changes, and we'll send that through a legislative process starting around January-ish. So because it's a legislative process, you'll see it as an L file. And it will go before Planning Commission and City Commission before adoption. So we'll have this long public process that should be very good, lots of meetings. As I referred to earlier, we're starting to meet with every neighborhood association right now, or at least those ones that are meeting in the summer, so we can drum up recruitment for our citizen team. There are lots of ways to stay engaged in this project. You can email me comments, post the comments online. You can follow updates. They'll be posted on the city's Facebook and Twitter. We'll have a couple of community briefings as well. So we want to go to Main Street and to the chamber and any group we can get our hands on and let everybody know what we're doing and get their input. Thus far, we seem to have received comments regarding banners. It sounds like a couple of the neighborhood associations would like them up for maybe a specific amount of time if you're opening a business or something. As you know, our code right now doesn't allow them. And maybe potentially we're starting to see a trend of people who would like additional signage during, say, the month of November around elections. One thing to keep in mind is that all of our code, as you know, is content neutral. So we can regulate the size, the material, how many signs, the locations of signs, but just not what they say. You want?
The unofficial, more signs in November?
Yeah.
Specifically related to campaign signs or just signs in general?
Since we're content neutral, it'd just be
Right.
signs in general, but the reason being to allow additional signs to support issues related to candidates or measures or something like that. So we're starting to see a couple trends pop up, and then the CAT team will really focus in on, you know, what is okay with our code and what is not okay. We want to make sure that our sign code is really reflective of what we would like as business people and residents. As you know, signs can really help shape a sense of community. If you go down Highway 99 in Gladstone, it has a certain character. Or on the flip side, if you go...
She didn't say what kind of
I
character.
know. In deference to my friend Wade Byers, who's the mayor of Gladstone.
Yeah, if you go to Leavenworth, there's a particular character or sisters that's projected through signage. So we want to figure out on the spectrum of signage, where does Oregon City stand? And is our code okay? Or are there different parts of it that we need to update since it's been so long? The other piece that we'll be working on after the fact is to make sure that we have a robust enforcement piece. So we'll have the code piece, and then we'll be working on a way to make sure that that code actually gets enforced and is implemented. One of the other things that the CAT team would potentially look at is our sign code process. Right now, you go up to our planning department, submit an application, it's approved on the spot. Is that good? We just want to do a check and make sure that that's an appropriate thing to do.
What about billboards?
Billboards, so right now we don't allow billboards.
No.
So it will be an issue if that's okay, if that's something the community likes. And then also, how do murals play with that since we're content neutral? What's the difference? And since we really only look at size, you know, there's a couple of issues that we want to pin down. One thing that we want to create code for, probably, if it comes up from citizens, it seems to have so far, is to create regulations for signs within the right-of-way. You'll see those A-frame signs downtown. We don't really have any particular standards about how big, how many, and we don't really have a process to permit them. So is that something that we want to do in the future?
We rewrote the sign code during our tenure, and I think that they have a place. I think we have some good precedent with regard to murals because it went to court in Portland, and you can obviously, I'm sure you know about their trials and tribulations. So I think we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I guess with regard to sign code, I really, from a standpoint of a community member, don't want to see us have a 10-year amortization period because it never, we had one before, but it was never enforced.
Right.
And some of the
What
same.
does that mean, 10-year amortization?
Well, that they have 10 years to come into compliance, and then they just kind of hope you forget
No.
about it happening.
Yeah.
And I think,
Surprise.
I know Gladstone, bless their hearts, they went all the way to court on their prohibition totally of billboards. We were able to deal with it by only allowing them in certain zones. But what I'm really afraid of is that these electronic ones, which are, and I have to say, as a driver, they are extremely distracting. And I have called into, ODOT on several occasions and said, you really can't let these continue to proliferate. And the thing is, Gladstone they basically prohibited it outright, whereas we did not. We had certain places and distances that we allowed them. So when ours went up, it wasn't like what happened in Gladstone where they just plastered 205 because they went all the way to court. So they have a particular, onerous situation that they're dealing with right now. And I know from having fought that battle a couple of times, we kind of threaded the needle. And I would not want to see that, from the standpoint of our community, change. The ones that we have, because believe me, they want the really big, I'm sure you've seen the ones with the poles but our code says if you take it down, you're done.
Yep.
And you don't get to put a replacement that's like 3 or 4 times bigger. And I think that's been really good for our community.
You're talking about the electronic ones, like the one by...
Right by the High Rocks Cafe, yeah.
I've never seen any in Oregon City.
No, we don't have any in Oregon City.
Yeah.
They had something like
And
that.
Milwaukee had one slip in on McLaughlin that they now have changed their code to not allow those electronic, because they're doing this all, I'm sure you've seen them, they're just doing this all the time, and it's enough to drive without being.
Have you ever noticed when they put the ones on, even the state ones, about an accident up ahead, everybody slows down on 205?
Well, but those are not
Caution about
advertising a
driving.
product, those are basically
Products, right.
information, and when nothing's going on, they're off,
Yeah.
whereas an electronic billboard, they are on,
Yes.
on, and on. They don't go off.
Well, the animation draws your attention, where a billboard that's not moving and changing,
Right.
You can glance at it, but it doesn't draw your attention in the same way that the animated one does.
There's one down on I-5 that, I'm trying to describe it, it's like an accordion. It flips, and there's something else on the other side of it. There's like 3 sides of it, and when I was not the driver, I was like, whoa, I saw something move out of the corner of my eye, and I looked back behind me, and here it was, motorized in some way and turning. But I've never seen anyone other than that one, except that one.
So I do apologize. The 2 mics here are directional, and so we really got to try and speak into those.
Right.
The one on the end will pick up a little bit better.
So, Laura, we've kind of jumped in. Do you want to kind of complete your presentation?
Yes, so at this point, we're trying to find as much public input as we can to start to inform our process. So OCsignCode.org is our website. Please, anyone could go post a comment there. We have a couple so far, but we just went live last week, so we're new at this. If you have any comments for our website, let us know. Our process, let us know. There's a sign-up sheet over there if you want to be on our email list, or you could do that at OCsignCode.org, sign up for our email list. And then also, if you want to start to think about which planning commissioner you would like to sit on our sign committee.
And that's just 4 meetings?
It's 4 meetings. We already have the date and the time picked, so you can already check your schedule or reserve it. It's all on our website.
Are you limited to just one planning commission member?
We have so far just slated 1 spot,
Okay.
but
Is there anybody on the commission that has a particular interest in being on that committee?
If it fit with my schedule, I would do it. I would want to talk with you more about your history.
How about if
I think we
we?
all need to talk about it.
Yeah. How about if we send out an email with the schedule, and
Yeah.
maybe at our next meeting we can decide. I think we have a little bit of time. Correct?
Yep. So between then and now, you can go to ocsigncode.org, look at our project, sort of think about whatever issues, and then I'll follow up with you at a later date.
And you said that the selection will be made by the end of August.
Yep. So applications are due August 16th, and the form is online. You just complete it online, and then the mayor will appoint positions the following week.
Okay, so we've got about 3 weeks to kind of sort that out.
Yeah, and I
Sure,
think
we all
ours is a
have
little bit
interest.
different than, you know, like, for example, trying to recruit from the business community, you know, or, there's probably going to be multiple ones of those, and we're going to have to choose, whereas
Here we
it's
won't.
not as...
Right. Well, my point of view is if nobody else is interested, I'll take the position, but if somebody has a specific interest, then I would defer to whoever, has the most interest in it.
Why are you looking at a sign manufacturer?
We want to hear from anyone and everyone that has anything to do with signs.
I think it's great if you want to hear from them, but do they really need a seat at the table? Because obviously there's an economic
Vested interest.
vested interest, and
Mhm.
I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying, gee, that seems a little odd. I know that the thing that I have been most surprised about is that as congested and as sprawling as San Jose, California, as most of you know, I have a brother and a sister who still live there. They have, over the last 5 years, changed their sign code, and it is incredibly amazing. I mean, the signs are still visible. They have low profiles. There's none of those big things that stick up in the air, and it has really cleaned up the community quite a bit.
Mhm.
You go down towards Gilroy, and it's kind of like our other town with the G. It's kind of like, whoa.
Well,
If you were to exclude somebody like a sign.
Well, no, they can participate.
I was going to say, because they would say, we weren't invited to the table to explain or talk about it from our viewpoint.
Well, it'd be like if we had security signs come in, or we had, some of the others, big ones in Portland. Their interest is really
I know, it's
not in this
organic.
community. It's, I'm going to make this as liberal as possible so I can, make more money.
They're just one faction of it.
Yeah, they are.
They're just giving input to it.
But, if we had, I know when we did this before, we had John Forresloff, who's now retired, but he was a local sign maker, and he made wooden signs that fit in with the McLaughlin district, because we want externally lit signs, and we have, if I may say for the record, a number of non-conforming lighted signs in our neighborhood that I would dearly love to see go away, because do you really need to be advertising yourself as you're a medical professional at night?
Mm-hmm.
You're not open, and if they had an externally lit sign, that would probably be nice, but it's one of those little neon jobs.
Yeah,
And
they're on the committee.
But, I think coupled with what Denise is saying and what Laura said earlier, it's important that I think the main focus of that committee is not necessarily what's in the best economic interest of sign manufacturers or sign companies, but what kind of community image we want. Because, and I'll just tell you from my personal experience, I grew up in Southern California, and there was one particular street down there that it was almost sign overload. It was so much signage that, it was impossible to read all the signs. And I think they carried it to the extreme that, if some are good, then
More is
many,
better.
many
More is better.
got to be
Yeah.
better. And frankly, I think just from a marketing standpoint, that's got to be counterproductive, because at some
Yeah.
point you get information overload and
That's
you
right.
just tune it all out.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing, that particular community, as you drove through, you knew where you were. You did not have to see the city limit sign. You drove into that community and you just knew where you were. And that was my first impression of Beaverton.
Mhm.
When I moved up here, the first time I drove through Beaverton, I thought, this looks just like Garden Grove, California. And I'm kind of going, wow, they've got the same signage regulations here that they had down there. And later on, I thought, you know what? I bet you most of the people that live here moved up from there.
From Garden Grove, you think?
Yeah.
Well, they have changed their sign code, but, just for fun, some Friday, or not Friday, but a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, drive down 82nd, and it will
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
blow your mind. It's
Yeah.
just, I think between the oversized signage and those little flag things, then you got the men that are, the floppy men that are blown up, and then you've got the twirly things. I mean,
Gorilla?
it's,
Yeah,
the
And the
gorilla
utility lines.
and the utility
So
lines,
simple,
and it is,
Beautiful.
It's,
it
it's
is,
visual overload.
well, you
is
know,
visual
you
overload.
can't really find what you're looking for because there's too much,
Yeah.
bombarding.
I will say, though, that it's going to be a sad day when the twirling bucket from Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Oh, no, that's,
Because
that,
it's the only
I
twirling
think,
bucket.
I think that it can qualify as a historic
It
sign.
absolutely is.
I don't want
Yeah.
that to go away. And
Yeah.
there's one someplace else where there is a Dairy Queen sign that it's the lit up ice cream cone. You do not see that anymore.
Right. See,
So,
So, I think we'll have multiple opportunities to provide input. I think we just wanted to give you an
Everybody
update on
tell their own
what our
story.
request is,
Yeah.
and we'll be back.
yeah,
Nice.
thank you very much. We're excited to work on this project.
Thank you.
Is someone from the chamber on the committee?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, they're always there.
And any suggestions for our process or anything else along the line, let us know. We want to have a great
Visual
process.
preference, good,
We're
bad.
thinking about that further down.
Yeah, well, I told Tony at the beginning that we'll just make this easy. All ugly signs are prohibited.
Yeah, there you go.
According to,
Well, it's
Peggy
very-
Collins
very
gave a
objective,
bunch of
isn't it?
people cameras to go out and take pictures
of stuff they like or
stuff
stuff
that
they don't like.
Yeah, good, bad, and ugly signs.
Oswego's signage is decent, very decent.
it's almost too decent in some ways because we have a problem with the overly regulated sign code, gold, ivory, and stuff that just is too
Restrictive?
too restrictive. And there was a gal that wanted to put in a pink sign with a little girl, and it was it was a clothing store, and it was really cool. It was a great sign, but the code wouldn't let her do it. And it was just one of those heartbreaking things to
Yeah,
tell somebody that it would,
In the city of
better
West
defines.
Land, in the city of West Land, the code was so restrictive is that when the Parks and Rec Department would put out signs for events coming up, the city's public works department would take down the signs that the Parks and Rec were putting up. So we'd have to go down to the garage to get them to put them back out and get permission to put them places just for events that were going on for Parks and Rec. So
I think-
there's all kinds of different codes.
I think there's going to be an interesting discussion about the A-frames because if they serve a purpose in terms of telling you something that you don't already know, that's one thing. But most of them are just the same repeat of kind of what
I have to do it because they're doing it.
exactly. And then you get the one that looks like that their 5-year-old made and it's out there and
Well, it seems to me there needs to be a balance between the economic side of things and the image side of things. And obviously, saying no signs at all, doesn't make any sense. So there's got to be a balance somewhere in between that ridiculous overload of signs and no signs. So
What about flags? Harley Davidson and Gladstone coming down 205.
Well, that's patriotic.
That's, that's an eye-catcher for me. I like to see it.
That's the Hurricane flag to end all flags.
They cut down the tree that was under.
I know that.
From interfering.
I know, did you notice that?
Yes, I did.
I'm thinking, really?
So,
Smaller flag, but no tree. Yeah, sorry.
so are we going to talk about the Willamette Falls Legacy Project now?
We are.
So if he can't do it, who's the backup? I think you're the
We
backup.
can draw straws.
We should have an alternate regardless.
Yeah. Well, if you have an interest, I'd say you're.
It's interesting. But I'm
Number
sure
one
we're
guy.
all interested.
So.
I like the
Well,
semantics.
Tony will send out
The email with
an
the
email,
meeting.
and we can all respond based on dates and things
Don't you
like
know it by
that.
heart right now, Tony?
Yeah, Laura for.
Oh, good answer.
So we have the project manager.
Oh, oops. Sorry about that back there.
That was locked in better. Okay. So, Tony, are you giving us the presentation?
I am. So, we've given you updates. We've been working with the trustee and our partners on the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, Rediscover the Falls. This is the website that we've created that we've put up here. It's rediscoverthefalls.com. This will be one of our main way to engage the community. On this site, we have our core values are on there. The plan, that'll be updated as products are created as we go through this public involvement process. How to get involved, we have our calendar on there of events that are ongoing, the news coverage that's happening. We have a Willamette Falls 101, just general questions, the history, the consultant team that we've put together to do this project. The photo of the day, why don't you go ahead and click on that one, Laura. And we update the website daily during the week, Monday through Friday, with a photo. And they are all archived, so you're able to go back and look at the photos that we've been putting up, and you're able to comment on them. Just to provide a little bit of history about the site, there's an amazing photo collection on this site that exists, as well as we had Mark Gamba come out early on after the bankruptcy occurred to take some photos of the property as well. So it's just another way to engage the community, to try to educate folks about the property, the complexity of the site, the history of the site that exists. And so it's just a good way to get some of this amazing resources that we
I don't know where that
have.
building is, or was. Are we looking down?
That is
Fifth?
the old, the post office, I believe.
No. I saw the picture in the post office.
The historic post office and commercial buildings.
How long has the page been up, Tony?
It's been about 2 weeks.
So there's not a lot of history.
Not yet, yeah. So we're just rolling this out right now. There's still some updating to it as we go through it. We're constantly adding information. We also have a Twitter feed as well as Facebook, so please sign up on Facebook, like it, and send it to your friends. That would be great. On the right, you can see our badge, the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, Rediscover the Falls. That will be the badge, the identity for the project. You'll see that on most of the materials that we do put out.
Looks good.
You also have a way to contact the project manager is Christina Robertson Gardner on this, with Kelly Moosberger assisting her with our other partners as well. And then on this one, you'll need to register to utilize and comment on the page. Anybody can go and look at it, but if you want to comment or whatnot, you do need to go and register. That way, when comments are posted, we know who they came from, as well as then allows us to make sure that our public noticing is complete as we go through that. So just a quick outline of the web page. Hope you get a chance to go on there, have a look at it. Also, just want to let you know that we've begun our community conversations, which is what we're gonna go through tonight after my presentation here. And these community conversations, we've already started them. We've held several so far. We actually were just at Clackamas County. We met the commissioners. We've been with Metro counselors, with you tonight. As the regulatory authority, we are, and running the project, we are going to be coming back more frequently to the Planning Commission and the City Commission as we go through this process to keep you updated as to where we're at. And so we have a very extensive community engagement part of this project, which, like I said, it involves these community conversations where we're actually going to the stakeholders we've identified and engaging them at their meetings or at their locations. We're going to be at the OCTA event on Friday night down at end of the Oregon Trail for the Oregon California Trails Association, which is going on all week up at the Monarch Hotel and throughout the region. But there's going to be the festival at the end of the Oregon Trail Museum on Friday night. We'll have a booth there. And then our first public engagement event will be at the First City Celebration. So we will be at the First City Celebration. We'll have a booth there on Saturday, July 27th, from noon till it goes to about 9 that night. So we will be on site there with engaging the community, getting their feedback. And we've secured one of the office buildings on Main Street where we'll be able to show some of the video that PGE had prepared, as well as some other interactive opportunities at that event. So hopefully you can come out on Saturday and have a look at that and participate. So before I do my PowerPoint presentation, we begin kind of what I think is the fun part. It's actually gone very well, of what do you want to see on the site in 35 years if this was to be redeveloped? Why don't we start with a little 3-minute video that we've put together, and after that we'll walk through the power plant.
Meeting on Saturday. Yeah, I thought it was people turned in your
Stories of comings and goings hang in the mist like ghosts.
Coyote and meadowlark took a rope and stretched it across the river, and they walked down the river trying to figure out when they wanted to drop the rope and create the Willamette Falls.
Stare for a while, and you sense an atmosphere of promise, of potential.
It was a focal point. It was a gathering spot. It was a place of power. And each culture that has come through got to the falls and stopped and thought about how they could best utilize what nature had created.
A fluke of geology, Willamette Falls elbows 1,500 feet across the river that shares its name and rises 4 stories high.
I really believe this is one of the great geological secrets of North America. It is the second largest waterfall in the United States. Volume-wise, the only one being bigger is Niagara Falls. People don't even realize that.
Human history has concentrated around this natural feature in unusual abundance.
Indian people have been at the Willamette Falls since time immemorial. Since thought of human people became conscious, we've been there.
Political and economic power and people's livelihoods have ebbed and flowed at the falls.
This hasn't moved since 1990, and it's still sharp enough to cut trees. God, there was how many million board feet of timberwood down this river?
A state was born here, Oregon.
This was the end of the Oregon Trail. This is where people stopped and settled.
And this is where moving water revolutionized how people live. Forever.
There's so many firsts here that have implications not only nationally but globally that changed our way of life. And it all started right in this little mess of buildings that most people just drive by on 205.
Industry rose up around the falls. To the east, in Oregon City, a paper mill. To the west, another paper mill. And one of the oldest power plants in the country. Alongside a historic canal and lock system. Altogether, perhaps 100 acres. A small, vibrant laboratory.
This was like NASA. This was like the Silicon Valley, and it really changed the world.
Is that available online?
Not yet. We're still working with PGE on some of the movie rights. They created that as part of their FERC relicensing, and they're working with Oregon Public Broadcasting and others to maybe distribute it more widely. I think that they've been a great partner to work with. Once that kind of plays out a little bit more, we'll probably be able to show this a little bit more on our website. But right now, they've requested we don't post it.
And this was produced by who?
Portland General Electric.
PGE.
So that was hopefully a good segue into the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. So we began this project. We've been working on this property since it went bankrupt in February of 2011, as many of you know. We began with our partnership with Metro and the due diligence work that we did last summer, trying to get an understanding of the property, the liabilities, the historical resources on the property, the stormwater, the environmental. And initially we were looking at it from a due diligence standpoint of what the holding cost would be to hold the property for 10 years and potentially buy it. We weren't able to put together that partnership with other agencies. And at that point in time, there really wasn't any private interest in the property. No one was banging down the door submitting bids. So this is an approximately 23-acre site. About 17 acres are north of the Portland General Electric seawall, and the remaining approximately 6 acres are south of the seawall, including the clarifier, the lagoon, and the rail spur that continues south towards Kenema, where then it intersects the main line of Union Pacific. We believe, the partners believe, and we've been working with our 4 core values this entire time of public access, economic redevelopment, culture and historic interpretation, and healthy habitats, to keep our partnership together and keep us on track. But we really do believe that this is a once in a generational, 150-year opportunity to reinvent this site, which has historically been cut off. The falls, the river have been cut up from public access. And it's historically been an industrial site, but it did start as our Oregon City downtown. This was a truly mixed-use area. You had 4th through 1st, and Main Street coming through. You had the trolley heading down to Kenema through this site. You had McLaughlin House was down on this property across from the woolen mill. You had the hotel down there. So you had this mix of retail, residential, employment, all on this site. And so part of this visioning process is to understand what the community would like to see on this site, realizing that this is going to take some type of, most likely, a public-private partnership because of the complexities of this property. And many of you have been on the site and seen some of those complexities. When we talk about the property, we identified during our due diligence works approximately 57 different buildings and structures on the property. Some ranging from buildings that could be potentially be on the historic register to what are essentially pole barns or lean-tos that were constructed primarily or specifically to protect equipment. And so you have this complex, very dense industrial development on there. There's a little over 500,000 square feet of building on what we call the Main Street level, so what you can see from the promenade. Realizing that on the 17 acres north of the PG Dam seawall on the southern part is probably another 7 to 9 acres underground of basements, pilings, foundations that have just been built on top of one another throughout the decades as this facility continued to expand out. This is just another overhead of the property. From here we have outlined the site, a little bit of the southern part. The spur continuing down was left off, but essentially that starts at about 25 feet wide and then continues to narrow down the further south you go until it essentially extinguishes itself, and the spur then jumps into the main line of UP as the grades match up.
Tony, who actually owns the falls, the physical falls? Under what jurisdiction does that fall?
That's that's
what I think.
It's a question. Portland General Electric has ownership out there.
They do?
Yes. Yeah.
And does the Coast Guard have jurisdiction?
Yeah.
They do, because it's a navigable stream.
Correct.
Okay.
But there's, you have a history there. Portland General Electric, they have documentation going back quite a way. And honestly, we didn't spend a whole lot of time on it because it's not part of this property. Mm-hmm. And that'd probably be a better question for PGE as to the specifics between them and the state. But they do have rights that predate statehood out in this area, which complicates things a little bit. Yeah. On the southern part of the property there, you can see the little Z going kind of southeast to northwest, and then it continues south right next to the clarifier. So that's that's PGE property there. And on the kind of west and east sides of that, on the west side you can see the big large clarifier, that's the 2 million gallons, that's part of the property. And then on the east side you can see the lagoon, which is part of the Blue Heron property as well.
So you're talking about the backwards L's,
correct.
Or a backwards 7, depending on how you're looking.
Mm-hmm. Correct, yeah. So that's the PGE part. We've been working with Portland General Electric quite a bit on this project in terms of trying to get an understanding of their concerns of public access, or how can we get folks out to the falls if this redevelopment is successful, because we see that as integral to making this a successful project. The public access is not only for the approximately half mile of Willamette River shoreline that's encompassed under the property of Blue Heron. You have about a quarter mile on both sides of the falls. But then how can you return the public back to viewing the falls, this amazing natural resource that exists that most people have never seen, or if they have, it's been from a boat, if they've been fortunate enough, or from 205 or 99E at the viewing. And we believe that, and that's one of the values, is the public access component of this. And that's integral into what we're doing. And that's something where, we've got to remember, and I think we've discussed this before, is that our partnership, our goal has always been to knock down perceived and existing barriers to redevelopment and private investment back into this property. And we believe that providing public access is a catalyst to doing something well on this property.
And frankly, I think the best view of the falls is from below, which is the hardest place to see it from.
Correct.
Just a quick question, Tony, as I look at this. I've sat on the Willamette Falls Heritage Foundation for a few years, and that's the other side of the river. Does any of this partnership include what West Lynn might do on that side of the river compared to what we're going to do, or is this only on our side of the Blue Heron area?
This is focused on the Oregon City side of Blue Heron.
Okay.
We've met with West Lynn, and we will continue to engage them. But this process, I mean, it is larger. This is the locks play into this, and Willamette Falls Heritage Area plays into this. But taking that 30,000 look is where we're at right now, kind of a framework plan, and engaging those other partners, those stakeholders, which we are. But in the end, we are focusing on this property as a product of the planning process. But during the initial discussions, yes, it is much larger. There's probably other connections we can make, whether it be to Lake O, Milwaukee, Portland. I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
I think Lake O is discussing whether or not to get involved.
I know, Tony, there's somebody here to say took us on a water tour at one point of summer or so ago. We went in just underneath the bridge over to the West Lynn side and looked at all that. I'd be ashamed to develop all this and still have all that to look at.
Well, that's, once again, though, you do have a functioning, profitable paper operation on the other side. You also have the Portland General Electric Sullivan plant, which is, operational hydro facility, and it's kind of a gem. I mean, they're very proud of that facility.
But they tore down Station A, though.
They did.
Station A was where the first electric transmission line went from Oregon City to Portland.
They tore that down?
Yes, they did. So here's your test. All of you need to tell me where the McLaughlin house is on that picture.
That was done by P.F. Morgan, wasn't it?
So where?
It's right.
Don't show them to him. Who can find it? This is your true Oregon City test.
Is that white one there, right in the center?
Well, there's a bunch of white ones.
Yeah. Well, not all in the
If you look
center.
at the big woolen mill one, it's right directly below that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. So I think this is just showing once again the historic uses that were on this property. It's always been a complex site. It's been an active site. It was our downtown. The plat for San Francisco was signed here. I mean, when you talk about the history that can be told walking through this site, from the geology of how the falls were formed in the Willamette River, and the how that impacted the Willamette Valley and how productive that became to Native Americans. This was originally seeded from the Grand Ronde, and you have that. This was a very sacred place in terms of for the Grand Ronde. Trading occurred here, so it was active before the settlers came.
Matter of fact, Dr. McLaughlin's first commercial enterprise was burnt to the ground in 1829 because the Native Americans said, "Get out."
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Well, good for them.
Yeah, he recognized very early that there was potential. But the thing I love about this picture, besides the fact that the McLaughlin house is in it, is look at the Willamette Falls area, the stuff that you don't see anymore. And it was, I think there's some writings translated from the Chinookan tribe and maybe the Molalla that I've seen that describe what it was. And Dr. McLaughlin in some of his early writings talks about the roar of the falls as he would go to sleep every night. And I was just thinking, boy, I mean, it's loud now, but those pictures are incredible to me because I think the first time I came to Oregon City in '73, I said to my husband, I said, "What's wrong with this?" Because I could see the angular line. I said, "What is that?" You know, I didn't know that it had been cemented, so to speak, and I was expecting this very wild, you know, falls because I knew about it. I had never seen it, and I knew that it was second to Niagara, and I was, you know, I was a teensy bit disappointed because it didn't. That's not what I had seen in my, you know, seen in my brain what I thought it was going to look like. But it's a cool picture.
And then obviously the falls themselves. I think I spoke a little bit about the opportunity here from when we talk about healthy habitats. You know, you have lamprey, salmon, you have shoreline opportunities, you have microclimates from the mist of the falls that are very unique to the falls themselves. So, you know, from a healthy habitat standpoint, we believe there are several opportunities on this site and in cooperation with our partners. You know, as industrialization occurred, and you know, historically we've all seen how river industrialization happens. Or you know, they kind of turned their back to the shoreline and it became more utilitarian in use. And now we have that opportunity to re-engage that shoreline, to you know, work on the habitat along there, work on the access to it, the educational component to it, to make it a thriving river shore once again.
Tony, so far I agree with everything you've said, but let me ask you, and I know you're going to have to guess on this, how long do you think, if everything goes fine, you know, we all go down the road together, how long do you think this is going to take until you get the full potential completed?
I think it's going to take a while.
25 years?
Well, because there's a lot of different factors.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of different players in this thing, you know, in the environmental aspect of it. And it seems to me that, you know, just from a scientific point, that it's going to take years and years and years before that gets realized. Not that it's a bad thing, it's just the way nature takes its course.
Right. I think that's part of this public visioning process is to try and build that community support that can withstand, that can keep the momentum that we've built going and build on it.
Because there's going to be generational changes along the way.
And how do you create a plan with enough buy-in, you know, that moves but doesn't get completely derailed, you know, that has enough buy-in and enough ownership and enough stakeholders that you can continue to drive that project through to fruition, realizing that now, today, you know, none of us in this room are good enough to say in 10 years what the market's going to demand, what the design standard, you know, but if you can keep the vision with these goals that everyone buys into and agrees to and are supportive of, you can continue to adapt as the market changes. You know, there's certainly parts of the property closer to 99E that are on basalt that are very simple. You know, there are parts of the property that are 35 feet up with, you know, 3 different foundations under it dating back to the turn of the century that are going to be much more complex and expensive. And, you know, all that plays into the redevelopment potential of that property and how quickly it'll occur. And, you know, are there projects that you know, if we get a plan that we buy, that everybody agrees into, and you have the partnership that we have now, and there's a lot of horsepower in that partnership when you're talking regional solutions at the state, Clackamas County, Metro, us, you know, we've had conversations with the feds, you know, that's a pretty powerful group. That, you know, are there projects that you can knock down early on to continue that momentum and the interest in the property that then continues to build on itself? Yeah. And when I talk about those 4 values, I'm repeating myself a little bit here because I'm sure you're all well aware. We have these 4 values, and they're not ranked for a reason, because you do one of those well, and we believe it strengthens the other 3.
Run through those again.
And I'll hit a slide here in 1 second.
You know, just I wanted to comment based on what you just said a minute ago. In my opinion, if you can shape the project so that there is a nugget at the beginning that is a payoff, that allows that public access early on, a viewpoint. It doesn't
even if it's temporary.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be the big deal. If you could get a viewpoint out there somewhere that would help get some public access out there and start to get some excitement about it.
Public support.
Public support, I think that'd be
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
I can't wait to have a fresh cut salmon at a stall. That's what I'm looking for.
And I think we completely agree with that.
That's, in my opinion, the way that you generate that momentum is to get something out there where people get a little taste of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over the summer, we had the two Hatfield Fellows. One looked at the catalytic value, the spin-off of this. If you create a world-class facility,
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
the spin-off is in jobs, tax revenue, property value,
Yeah.
not only for Oregon City,
Yeah.
Clackamas County, Westland.
It's
the
a region. It's a
the
regional.
state.
Yeah,
It's regional.
Huge.
It's a regional.
I mean, when we think about this, we have the second largest waterfall by volume in our regional center.
They did it in Monterey.
Oh, yeah, we used
Yeah.
to go to Cannery Road when we were
That's
kids.
kind of what I,
You wouldn't want to go there after dark back in the
oh,
day.
indeed. no.
Well, just
Yeah.
think of at the elevator, that viewpoint up on the elevator.
Mm-hmm.
If you had something at that scale with a similar interpretive display, that's all it would take, right there by the falls.
Start
Yep.
drawing folks. Yep. And so part of that catalytic value was the tourism potential to bring to this site. We believe it's very high.
I think you
Tower,
can have.
the Vista House, Multnomah Falls.
Yeah.
Those are amazing draws, and it's if you can do this correctly, where it's not a come visit once and gone. It's hey, we've got folks in town, or hey, it's Saturday night. What do we want to? Let's go down and see the
Exactly.
falls.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
tie it in with some walking trails and things like that.
Chuck, you know that Peacock Lane in Portland?
Oh, yeah.
Look at take the kids.
Yeah, it's a big draw.
It's big, and just one lousy little block.
It's
You know?
not just for little kids.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I go every year.
Do you?
So the process. So what we're doing right now is our community conversations. So I signed and the commission approved an agreement with the bankruptcy trustee, and that's where we started on this public outreach and framework master planning process. And essentially, the trustees bringing money to that project, cooperation on that project, and then what we also guaranteed was that we would have the framework plan in front of the Planning Commission by April 24th of 2014. So this is a very aggressive community engagement and land use planning process, which is good and bad. We could debate this property for probably 2 years very easily, but this with some deadlines in here.
Yeah.
It really requires us to focus and get to some of these larger issues.
It's good to have
and address them.
deadlines. It looks like your main business.
Yeah. And so right now we're at the initial stage. It's the vision, it's the aspiration, it's the what do we want to see on this property, and that's what we're focusing on right now.
Plan community conversations, I think they're planned like at City Hall, or are you going around the neighborhood association meetings?
We're going around.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's
both.
How's McKittrick doing? Is he on life support yet?
Not yet. No, he's doing all right.
Is that okay?
Decided to have an offer.
Forgetting.
So, in this vision, we're looking at big picture goals. This is not going to be a development plan. We're not going to go block 2 is going to be a 4-story building with retail on the floor and market rate commercial or residential above it. This is a vision goal document. We're addressing larger infrastructure, specifically how do you get in and out of the site, how do you deal with 99E and 205.
What about soil conditions?
In terms of
Soil.
There isn't any? No.
Yeah,
There's a
well,
little bit.
the unknown is the scary thing, and if
Well,
you,
we did an environmental phase 2 on the property as part of our due diligence, and we found that the environmental contamination on the site is manageable. It wasn't nearly as bad as everyone speculated, so we feel that it can be handled.
Is the soil capable of holding large structures and
That work needs to be done.
for public safety?
Primarily, it's with salt.
Probably part of the framework.
Where you're going to be constructing anything. So we're very confident that that is it's not what it's not 15 feet of sand and silt that'll liquefy.
Yeah,
You're into rock.
okay.
Yeah, on this property.
That's along the waterfront?
Yes.
Oh,
You must
okay.
got to remember that the falls actually continued through the property. A lot of that building and structure you see is out over where the falls would have been. So if you go a little bit north of here, like if you're coming down 99E where everybody used to fish off the wall, you have that just imagine that continuing down through the site. So you have this basalt cliff continuing into the site that does exist.
And over the millenniums, I'm sure all the silt got washed away down to the bedwalk.
So, I always love this, flexibility with certainty. That is what we're trying to provide here. And the flexibility is that, we're going to make some good guesstimates. And, when we're looking at market feasibility, when we're looking at, rents, when you're looking at property values, we utilize those. But realizing that, as you said, we don't know the timeline of redevelopment here. And those change. So it's identifying those goals and that vision, and then allowing the private side to come in on the property for the private redevelopment and work within those to create what they can do and then sell to the market as well. So it's providing that certainty of where development happens, what the mitigation is, what the costs are, but then allowing flexibility to come in and work with the site and create something that is profitable. And here I'm back to the 4 values. So public access, we talked a little bit about that along the Willamette River. We see this as an integral part of any plan on this property. Public interest, public access along the falls, to the falls is integral. Economic development, what can we do here? We lost 175 jobs when Blue Heron shut down in February of 2011. You have an opportunity here to create value on this property that will be good for the community. What exactly happens on this property? We haven't put anything down yet, and that's what part of this process is to try to get an understanding of what do we want to see out here. So you have a great opportunity for economic redevelopment of this parcel. Its proximity to 205, its proximity to 99E. It's adjacent to a regional center. We intend to amend the regional center boundary to include this property inside of it. So we see great potential for economic development. But then you also have, the other parts of economic development that come from doing a great project here in terms of the tourism draw that you can bring here, or visitors to the site, or other investment into this property. So there's multiple ways to get economic development out of this property, we believe.
How's our transportation development plan figure into this thing if we're right at the top of our...
What we're investigating with ODOT, I believe, as all you recall, when we went through the transportation system plan, we identified some state facilities that had some issues in terms of how they were functioning. The legislature passed a multi-use, multimodal area, an MMA. And so what it essentially does is it acknowledges that in regional centers and on some state, that the costs, the projects are either not feasible or they're very cost prohibitive. And so it's a recognition that are there alternatives? Can you focus on, making sure that they're safe, and you can do that through multiple ways. But it's that trade-off of during certain peak, the more congestion will be accepted if you mitigate through these other measures. So essentially we're right now negotiating with ODOT on an MMA designation in this area to deal with the trips potentially from this site, because it is zoned general industrial, and most likely we don't believe a general industrial use is going back in there. And you're probably looking at some type of a comprehensive plan amendment and zone change, which then means you have to comply with the transportation planning rule at the 20-year horizon, which is where the MMA comes in, because we don't believe we can meet it. So it's identifying what are the alternatives. And
there
how,
for a minute,
I
I thought this was going to be complicated there for a minute.
No, not at all.
I keep telling myself it's only 23 acres. Healthy habitat, we talked a little bit about that. Originally we were talking about environmental restoration was one of the value words that we used, but when you read the text of what we're trying to accomplish, we believe healthy habitat describes it a little better, because it's not just habitat restoration that we're doing. It's much larger than that. When you're looking at how you deal with stormwater, how you deal with access, how you deal with resources, both in the water and on the shoreline. So the healthy habitat was to be more encompassing of what we believe was the description of what we were trying to accomplish out there. And then culture and historical interpretation, we talked quite a bit about the cultural significance of this property, the historical significance of this property, and how does that mesh into the redevelopment of this project. When you look at developments, and they're out there, creating main streets, right? And they're creating this, and they have to recreate it. It's fake. You have buildings here that could set the tone.
Yeah.
You have you have that authenticity already built in. And are there ways to use that? And once again, we believe that could raise the development potential of this property. You don't have to go fake it. It's already here.
Are there any tangible pieces of the paper making equipment that you can incorporate? It's probably, I know it's a small scale, but.
It's NRI has pretty much taken everything.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Someone posted a
It's like you're
picture
doing a backup.
of something
Yeah, just an
on the
hour.
shore, the handmade grinding stones that were
Yeah.
grinding wood into paper.
See, that would be.
And it's on the
Something to
shoreline
incorporate
like
into
right
that.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't you see a craft industry springing up that would, make blankets again? Which would be awesome.
There was a place in Lake Oswego that made neckties.
I saw that,
That was just bizarre.
and they're not there now.
Right.
I keep going back and referring to that Granville Island in Vancouver.
Yep.
It's, to me, this site is tailor-made for that type of development. A mixed-use site, all of the elements that we talked about at the beginning would fit there.
Just seems to be calling out. Yeah. So what's happened?
So you want the point towers too?
So
I don't want the point towers.
the legislature, so the governor did put in his budget $5 million to support this project. It was approved by the legislature on their last day. I think it was July 8th or so. That money is set aside. There are certain things that we'll have to come up with a financial plan. We have about 2 years to accomplish that. I think we have to have it done by March of 2015 in order to get the bonds sold and the $5 million available. And that money is for investment in the site and getting it development ready. It can't be used for consultants, planning work, studies. It needs to be a hard cost into the project to help infrastructure. Yeah. So if you're looking at demolition, infrastructure, cleanup, so that's what that money can be used for. As many of you are aware, Eclipse Development submitted a $4.1 million cash offer to purchase the property. The bankruptcy trustee accepted it and brought it to the court for their consideration. So right now, I believe that August 21st is what's called the overbid date. So anyone can come in and overbid the $4.1 million, but that has to happen by August 21st. If there is an overbid, it'll go to auction a week later on August 28th.
I missed something. Is Eclipse Development all of us? Or is that
No, it was a private development company that came in and submitted an offer on
Does
the property.
anybody know what that property is appraised at?
No, I don't.
Has an appraisal been done on it by the bankruptcy trustee? I mean, it would be a hard one because you have to look at it from the standpoint, here it is at zero, and then
Here's your liabilities.
you don't, here's your liabilities, but nobody really knows what the redevelopment potential is, and how would you appraise that on a what if?
You have to appraise it as general industrial right now, because
Yeah.
that's what the entitlement is.
Right.
So right now, Eclipse has submitted the offer. They are a private development firm out of Irvine, California. They have no money in the game right now, so there was no money down. So essentially, they can walk at any time for any reason during their due diligence period.
So that's just a verbal bid.
So what is
No, it's written up.
So what does
Yeah,
$4.1
yeah,
million mean cash?
What do you mean?
What does that mean?
To
So are they coming, when it's done with bags saying, here's your 4.1 million?
well, they're not financing it. I mean, it's an all cash deal.
It's an all cash deal.
Yeah.
So
So essentially, the bankruptcy trustee would have the money available, and then he would disperse to the creditors that are still owed.
And that has to take place by August what?
The overbid date was set by the judge
Mm-hmm.
of August 21st.
Mm-hmm.
So if any overbids come in by then, they would go to auction.
So let's say that date comes and goes, is the court obliged to accept that bid?
That's up to the
That
judge.
offer?
Yeah, that's up to the judge. So there would still be, I believe, and I don't have all the dates, there's still, let's say August 21st comes and goes and no one submits another bid. So Eclipse is essentially the winning bidder. I believe they still have 2 or 3 weeks to close at which point they could walk at any time up to the close.
But Tony, does this mean that that all the planning that you're doing and all the work, that would be out the window?
The way we have the agreement written with the trustee is that both the City of Oregon City and the bankruptcy trustee will work with whoever the buyer is to bring them into the bankruptcy trustee's position. And we see that, for $50,000 that the trustee is responsible to bring, or the new buyer, that they're getting, that hopefully they see the value that the partnership brings, and that they will assume that position. Well, I think they'd be foolish to walk away from it.
If someone bids higher, will Eclipse be given another opportunity?
It'll be a public auction.
Okay.
On the courthouse.
So Zach, you can go in and bid $4.1 million and 1 cent.
$250,000 increase.
Now, wait a minute, I've got my 250 million still.
Great.
There it
So
is.
does the city and the county like this idea of somebody, a private developer offering money for it? Or?
Well, that's been the intent all along, is to knock down perceived
Not
and
that the city or
existing
county will want
development. We need private investment in
You
this
need private
property.
one. Okay.
We can't control the market, we can't control the timing. All we can do is try and work within, play the cards we have. And we still believe that public visioning and addressing the larger infrastructure and transportation issues on the property are going to serve whoever the potential owner is.
But public access to that piece of property is going to bring people to that site. People means consumers. Consumers means that they're going to shop to whatever mixed use is on that premise. And it's also going to extend to downtown.
Unless it's somebody who just wants to develop condos and everything else, forget everything else.
Yeah, that's what's
Well,
going
I think we got to be careful of the speculation.
Yeah, don't.
That's why we're doing this visioning process, and we will deal with that when we get to it. If the private developer doesn't want to work with us, I'll work with our city commission and determine, and our partners, and say, okay, is there a different track we want to take here? We are in the end the regulatory authority, and that brings a lot.
Is your vision kind of like a concept plan then? If somebody wants to do it, this is the concept we have.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing that they could develop on that site without a zone change would be industrial.
Yeah.
Correct.
Mhm.
So unless they're planning to reactivate the site as an industrial site, they're going to have to go through a zoning change of some type.
Correct.
No matter what.
Yeah, comp plan amendment.
And so, obviously, the more cooperation we have by the city and the public, the
You
easier
don't have
it's
your
gonna
mic.
be to-
You don't have the mic.
The
Sorry.
more cooperation they have from the city and the public, the easier it's going to be for them to get through that process if they're planning to make a zone change.
Right, and also remember that in when we updated the comprehensive plan in 2004, if there's a significant change on this property, they do need to go through the master planning process, so that's another step in there as well.
So I think you're right that it would serve the interest of whoever does buy the property to cooperate with the process that you've already set in place.
Understand.
The other thing that, just to follow up on what you're saying, Charles, is that, it's my understanding that there has been some, let's just say that certain people in the community have checked them out, because obviously they're going to be coming in here as an outsider, and that's going to be a little bit of a high bar for them to reach. And I think it would behoove them, if they're smart, they would come with a welcoming attitude. I can't imagine somebody spending that kind of money and coming in and saying, too bad, so sad. They
Right.
would, shoot themselves in the foot.
And the irony here is that if they had come in and bought the property right away when it first was available, they would have had all that equipment. They could have reactivated the site as a paper mill, but all that equipment's gone now. So that's not an easy option at
Right.
this point.
And so just a little plug. This is what I talked about earlier. We're at the first city celebration on July 27th from noon to 9. We'll have a booth out there, interactive, engaging the community. Kind of some of the questions you're going to hear tonight, to get that feedback. We'll have the PG video, an interactive area in one of the office buildings. So great event. Hopefully folks will come out. And
This is where now, Tony?
This is downtown.
Downtown.
Oregon City. Yep.
And you'll have an office storefront?
Yeah, so they're going to close off multiple streets down there while they do the festival. We'll have a booth in the middle of the festival, as well as then we'll point you to some of the other
Is that
areas.
your staff that are manning that booth?
Yes. And so with that, maybe we can start off, the question is, and I guess, maybe if we can go through this one at a time and not, and let folks say what they want to say and then pass it along, just for ease of me tracking everything, and then also for the mic so we can pick this up.
Is there a chance we can take like a 5-minute break?
Certainly, you can do whatever you like.
Let's take a break.
All right.
5 minutes.
What's the process we're about to do? Just say what we think.
about his money?
Oh, I got it.
They know about it.
I think you should make a bid. I think
Putting
you
the mics
should make a
live
bid.
now.
I'm going.
So as part of our exercise tonight, I'd like to think about.
And you're not giving it to them ahead of time? See, I already did this Saturday, so I know what the questions
So
are.
you can go first.
No, thanks.
Looking into the future, the project's been successful. It's been redeveloped. 20 years out, what would you like to see on the site? And I think it's just, your aspirations, your vision, your ideas. I think it's just a way to start to just think about what you'd like to see personally.
So you're saying it's already developed, so aren't you asking us what we do see in our mind's eye? What's there?
Yep. So who wants to take a whack at it?
I'll go first. What I'd like to see on this side, first of all, is a world-class museum identifying the heritage, the historical heritage of that piece of property and the area. I'd like to see some mixed use. I'd like to see a lot of the property devoted to the public access. I'd like to see a world-class hotel, really well done, overlooking the falls with a really good restaurant on top, inviting the public. I'd like to see some means by which conventions could be held there for the surrounding area. I'd like to see a plaza for the public to have certain events that they would be invited to hold. I'd like to see an area where we could have some flags identifying the various surrounding, obviously the state flag, the American flag,
Don't forget the Canadians.
the Canadian. I don't care. Just flags, and it would pay tribute to our fallen heroes from the state of Oregon and everybody that has made this country free. I think that I'd like to see some activity on the water for water transportation, sports activities, anything that the water-oriented people might celebrate there. I would like to see, and as a result of and some mixed commercial use. I don't discharge the idea of public enterprise participating on this, but I don't want to see it overwhelmed by that. I want to see, I think what would happen as a result of that would be a world-class facility that people from all over the world would come to enjoy, watch the falls. I think they would come via Portland International, I-205, I-5, Interstate. I know I'm going to leave a lot of things out. But I think the potential there is to draw that amount of people there from all over the world, and that world-class museum celebrating the heritage of Oregon, because when the Oregon Territory and Lewis and Clark was involved, the whole country had their eyes on that, and I think the whole country would have their eyes on this as a place to come. I'm looking at probably at a minimum of 100,000 vehicle trips annually there, and I think it would revitalize downtown, and I could go on and on. I think this would be the Mount Rushmore of the West in terms of attracting people from inside the United States and our friends from Canada and people from all over the world. That museum would be a center place where people could come and study this Oregon Territory. And it would be a joint venture between University of Washington and Washington State and two colleges in Oregon to support that facility.
You see that orange roof over there?
Yeah.
That's the Museum of the Oregon Territory.
Okay, let's buy it.
Leave Washington, the Huskies
It already exists.
Right.
So-
But I think what would result would be the enterprise, the commercial enterprise that would come out of this thing would just be mind-boggling. So those are some of my thoughts.
Covered just about everything.
And as you guys express your thoughts, I'll interrupt you and add a few more.
Yeah, just about. I was going to say that along with all that world class, we need more community-oriented, smaller restaurants too. So much like I was referring to earlier, like a Ports of Call building that would house small public community restaurants, community shops for people, jewelry artists, things like that. But not a major shopping.
I don't want to see Walmart
Right,
in
not
there,
a
and I don't want
Walmart,
to see
Target,
Target.
Fred Meyer, or anything like that. This is for smaller community. But the what you were referring to is, and I think I've seen pictures, is a plaza that would go out towards the waterfront where people could picnic and relax, and there could be kayaking if they wanted to, but there'd be a little area on the river. But not recover it, but bring it back to a public gathering place where you could have special events down there. Right now, I know the Native Indians were doing an event down at Clackamas Park. It would be great to have a huge area down there where we do events, they can do events, historical significance, cultural events.
That'd just blow your head off.
I'd like to expand on that community aspect because I think it has a potential of being its own community. And I think of South Waterfront in Portland on how that is emerging as its own independent community. It has its own farmers market, it has its own community manager, and it's in a lot of ways completely autonomous, but strengthened because of its proximity to Portland.
Right.
And I think we have an opportunity to create something with open space and green space and mixed use and retail and restaurants and hotels, but still having its own personality that's supported by being connected and connected through Oregon City.
Right.
While telling its own historic story.
By the way, when I was referring to restaurants, I know that the world-class restaurant's important, but that sometimes prices people out of being able to enjoy it, so it would be nice. I would love to see something that had a balcony that went out over the falls, just even slightly, or just overlook them so you could see the falls while you're out there. It's kind of like, not Stonehenge, what's the one, over the clock? Stonecliff, over that. Just something that's got a nice, pleasant atmosphere that's medium price. But again, restaurants, places where people can gather and enjoy it. Nice glass.
Can I expound on your community?
Sorry.
I don't so much see it as a separate autonomous community, but I guess one of the things I would hope is that I would continue as a resident, and other residents would feel like it is our place, and that we would continue to go there and mingle with people, and it not become just a tourist-oriented place where we go, oh, well, I don't really want to go down there because it's so crowded, or it's this, or it's that.
Too expensive to go.
Or too expensive, but it's a place that the community intersects with visitors. And I know that that was initially a goal of the Trail Center. And unfortunately, what happened is that we all went once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and then we all stopped going because we'd been there, we had done that, we'd seen it, and we would only go when visitors there would come into town. And it just has not really lived up to the potential of the trail master plan that was created. And I think if we, just a personal side, we went back to that, started all over. But I have lived, for those of you who have lived in a town where there's a huge tourist attraction, you sometimes kind of feel like you get put to the side. Yeah. So I would like to see some of that mix.
A place that you want to keep going back to.
Yeah.
Friday night.
Yeah,
It's
and not feel like, oh God, let's not go down there because it's overrun with.
Well, you don't want it to be been there, done that.
No,
You
I
want it to
don't.
be-
I don't. But I could
That's the place to
see.
go to.
Events, festivals.
I could see the rather than having the farmers market at the hilltop, I could see
On
that.
cement.
I could see that plaza
Right.
being used.
Well, the
For-
farmer's market that's downtown on
Wednesdays.
could be down there.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Any of them on
Yes.
grass.
Which I see as, you know, a
Because
way to.
Right now, the one that's downtown is a compromise because you're taking up a street space. But
Right.
if you had a plaza that was
Yes.
designed for it.
Yeah,
it
a
would be-
plaza that could accommodate it so
Yeah.
that it was, that so it would do that.
Right.
Like this,
I would really like that in the sense that, you know, it's,
I think one of the biggest problems in the downtown is that there are bars and rehab and lawyers and the courthouse, right? And
lawyers
that's-
have their place.
Well, and right, and you can go to the bar and you can get drunk and you can
Hire a
go
lawyer.
hire a lawyer and go to rehab and all on Main Street. I mean, so there needs to be something more. I think the most important thing really is there's been some great effort at creating some pedestrian connectivity
Yeah.
on the south or north of the bridge. That needs to continue past the bridge some way down Main Street and then into Blue Heron and up around the promenade so that whole circle is completely closed so that there's this walking circuit
Would you
that you could
support
do.
extending Main Street back through there like
Oh,
it
absolutely,
was?
absolutely, yeah,
And
absolutely.
when I was on the
The-
selection committee, one of the consultants came up with an idea of recreating part of the grid, so you wouldn't have
Yeah.
a real street that
So
went.
you have the
what would be
concept
that-
of a
what's that
20-minute
with
community
East and West?
in there.
Yeah, we'll call it East and West.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, because it is a
Right.
little, but anyway, the,
Fourth, third, second.
yeah, but
Yeah.
some of those streets were created
Right.
to provide public access, but it wasn't a street.
So you have
street.
20-minute communities, almost like a 20-minute community where you have gathering nodes in, and then a main square where you have the farmer's market. And I think that's really how you got to think about it in terms of infrastructure. And then there should be some, like with this rail spur, you would want to really take advantage of that. And I don't know how you'd be able to create some kind of light rail or some sort of rail access someday. I know that's supposed to be coming at some point.
Well, somebody at our meeting Saturday said it would be a great time to move the depot back to its original location, so you could
Right.
come to Oregon
Yeah.
City on the train,
But
get off and walk.
I think it's really important to bring things like that. That's why I mentioned the pieces, maybe little bits and pieces of the plant that was still there, and things, maybe even some stuff about the woolen mills and McLaughlin
Good to
House and
say
some of the other
extend
things that
Main
were there.
Street.
I think
Recreate Main
I think
Street.
Bob
Yeah.
and I may be the only ones who remember maybe even driving down Harbor Drive before it became Tom McCall Park, and that's a good example. Tom McCall Park, the Rose Festivals down there, other festivals, the concerts, the blues
Right.
festivals, all those things, and having something of that
You'd-
nature.
Absolutely, you'd want to have. Yeah, I mean, you really do want to think of the 24-hour city concept when you're looking at this, so that there is liveliness and vibrancy and things that people do want to go to. I mean, there's little things in Main Street now. I mean, there's the Verdict. There's
I've been down
there's
to the two little antique shops.
Cypress and the other kinds of things are starting to happen down there that are good.
Another dumb idea that I thought about one day when I was in Seaside is, wouldn't it be cool to have Main Street and then you get to the end and there's like a little turnaround
Right.
similar to like the
Like
prom,
Seaside.
like in
Mhm.
Seaside,
Turnaround.
but not surrounded by giant hotels on the other side, so you can't see anything.
Well, that's I mean, yeah.
Look what Lake Oswego's done over there in its redevelopment. Their, the turnaround there and the statue, the falls.
Oh, Fortuna, yeah.
Yeah,
mhm.
and the park there overlooking the.
Millennium Park.
You know,
Mhm.
that's
That's all.
design.
That's all Doug Schmitz, and he, at great professional cost, he acquired a lot of property and just went for it. And a lot of people got mad at him. I think the West End building was the straw that broke the camel's back for him. But I think it was still a good idea to do it because we are in a city hall that's falling apart right now, and it would be great to move into that building. But anyway, that's a whole other
When's
thing.
the theater coming back?
They're working on it. Yeah.
Tony, I think one of the factors involved in this whole thing, though, is the word design. Not just the use of the property, but the design of it. A plaza,
Yeah, I think
Microphone.
Yeah.
microphones.
Well, we kind of.
So, one of the things I think we have to be careful about is how we approach the design of the property and at what cost? You know, when I say cost, you're going to have public support of it, you're going to have developer support of, you can't tell me to put this building here and yada, yada, yada. And we're talking about plazas overlooking the water and that kind of stuff. And the other thing I forgot to mention too was the lighting of the falls in the evening, and maybe the projection of the history of Oregon on the falls or in that area, like we're going to do down there on the elevator. Just have that a permanent factor. People would come from Portland just to see that, you see, and it could be seasonal, you know. In the fall, we'd have seasonal themes and so on and so
Would it
forth.
disrupt the salmon?
Oh, well,
See
I
covered
mean,
wagon coming
yeah,
through the falls.
we'd let them know that
Let
that was
the
going
salmon know ahead
to,
of
let them,
time?
yeah,
That's right.
sure.
We'd put up warning
Zach
signs.
was going to talk a little bit about education opportunity.
I mean, it just
That's good.
graduate education, postgraduate education. There's so many different ways
Yeah.
you can go
Yeah.
spin that. And I'm sure that local universities would love to take part in.
We get people to sponsor some pedestal monuments where it says you're in this direction and you are looking at this, and then you're standing here and you're looking at that, and you're over here and you're looking at
Like
this.
Porch Mountain.
Right.
Well, and maybe that gets incorporated into the interpretive center where you have a classroom environment available as well as the viewing and education. A couple things that my thoughts, I think all of the ideas I've heard are great, and Bob, you got us off to a great start. But two things I think would be really important ingredients is to have some permanent residents, and my preference would be apartments over condominiums. If it was a mid-range cost price point where you don't necessarily have to be a millionaire to live there, I think that'd be great. And then the other thing is, in keeping with the idea of some of the thoughts that I've heard, kind of that light industrial craftsman kind of
People are
thing.
making stuff.
If you could actually have some of the smaller shops, like Tom's talking about, in a fashion that you could have people hand making things, arts and crafts kind of things as a component of it, I think that'd be great. And that was the one thing that really struck me when I went to Granville Island, is that you'd go into the shop and they had beautiful things on display.
Vancouver?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they weren't the mass manufactured things that you see when you go down to the department store. This was stuff that was made
they had
there
nice stuff- they had
in the
nice stuff
shops.
there. Yeah,
So
Indy
I think
too.
something like that would add to the draw, especially if you had a theme where people could tie into the historic nature of things.
There's an opportunity, I think, to have a gallery.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
there's also the opportunity of, I'm not so much, we got beat over the head at my office about world class, so I don't use that term anymore, but you can use it.
No, thank you very kind.
It went along with who moved my cheese, so
Oh.
it's got one of those deals. But I could see, one of the buildings being recreated, one of the historic buildings being recreated in a modern version to have like a mid-range boutique hotel, not super expensive, not Motel 6, but not the Benson.
Right.
But
Yeah.
here's, I was thinking of that building on the one that was at 5th and Main that was the old post office. It's about 3 or 4 stories. That could be very cool. Even a reproduction of the woolen mill. That could be
Yeah.
a hotel. And I know a developer, during one of my National Trust classes that I took on redevelopment, they took an old mill, a flour mill site, and they turned that one main building that was still mostly okay, and they turned it into a little hotel. And it's
I think what you're thinking
Gorgeous.
almost is like Timberline Lodge, when you go in there and you see that all the elements were built by residents in
It
that
could
area,
be,
and the
yeah.
blankets were Pendleton blankets and all this, and you could do a lot of production.
I could
for
see a
it.
Pendleton retail store down there.
Yeah.
You know,
You're going to have a lot of people
but
down there, Tony, a
no
lot of people.
7-Elevens or
No big gulps?
No, sorry, no big gulps, you know, I don't
I
even
was
see
thinking a water slide, maybe.
a Quiznos or a Subway, or, I mean, I just don't see any, what is the term for those?
Franchise
National
chain.
franchised retail chains, you know, and I'm not saying that they don't have their place, because I
But
can,
not there.
but, you know, if they could go into, and I think, who was talking about a design? I think setting a tone, I don't see this as a modern-looking area. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
to me, it's another extension of downtown, and I think there should be some design standards about.
Well, I hate to use the word theme architecture.
No, I don't want to use, that's why I'm not using that.
But I do think design standards that,
I think you gotta have them.
well, I think design standards will be important. I don't think you necessarily want to say, we want to make this look like Knott's Berry Farm.
No.
But on the other hand,
Not Williamsburg either.
you don't want it, yeah, exactly. But
Signage.
on the other hand, you don't want it to look like a 21st century, Crystal City on the end of the peninsula, you know.
Well, Tom just mentioned something, signage. You've got to have, that's going to set the tone.
Well, I think signage is a part of the overall
design.
design. You need some criteria that sets the framework.
Well, I strongly support a design review board, to make sure that this thing doesn't get out of hand. But it just takes one. Just one, and I'm telling you, it'll ruin everything for 50, 100 yards.
Well, it sets a
Well,
precedent.
one thing Tony said at the beginning that I think it creates a way of maybe setting establishing a benchmark is that there is a historic element to the site.
Yeah.
And the fact that you've got a historic element to the site, you don't have to start with ground zero. You can say, these are elements that we appreciate.
Strongly support.
And so, obviously get rid of the corrugated metal buildings and
Well,
things
yeah.
like that, but try to trend back toward those historic forms that were there on the
And
site.
there's enough pictures and documentation that we know what those forms were.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that the first picture Tony showed, you still, as you said, it was mixed use. There's a big yard there that someone had a big portion of their property, and there's some other pictures I've seen. There's a cow or two there.
Yeah.
I mean, and they had a lean-to shed for their barn. I'm not saying we do that.
Well, it's
but
funny.
the form of the buildings is there on what was there.
Bob was talking about water transportation, and that one picture, I'm sure I saw a steamboat parked out in front.
Yeah.
So
Well-
I'm thinking, steamboat, they used to, a lot of people don't realize they used to have steamboat races from Portland to Oregon City.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Is that
Well,
right?
there was the dock area down there, still part of the dock left. Not the original dock, but where the passengers would disembark and come into Oregon City and then go back down.
So
But-
before the locks
Locks.
were built, you kind of had Kenema, which, the steamboat captains would keep their boats on top. And there was a very lucrative portage business that brought them down from the steamboat on top to the steamboats on the bottom and continued down. And there was quite a little bit of a uproar about putting the locks in
Because it was going to
because it drove that portage business up.
Yeah. But, I think that's a potential opportunity there. It could be water taxis, it could be a
Yeah.
portage for boats coming from Portland. And the other thing that several people have mentioned, I think one of the design criteria when you get into your design standards is that there needs to be a certain element of public access to the waterfront side.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to have 100% access to the whole frontage, but the idea of building a bunch of stuff that cuts off that
Right.
access is
I
not going to be
think
helpful.
I said it earlier where you'd have the street grid recreated and those east-west streets would create fingers or view corridors so you could walk out there to the end. You can't do it on the east side so much because of the cliff, but you could do it on the west side where you get these glimpses through where some of the buildings are, and you'd say, oh, there's the river, there's the river, there's the river, and you'd have different opportunities and different experiences from different points.
Well, smart developers in this area would recognize that that's an opportunity. But I think it's just one of the basic criterias that we need to incorporate into the standards, is to say that that is a given, that we anticipate not cutting off that.
Earlier, Denise, you brought up standards, or not, you don't want to see Crystal City or things like that, glass, but I was thinking back to, we've all witnessed historical locations within Oregon as well as elsewhere. I mean, every time I go to Pendleton, I really enjoy going through the tours that they go underneath in the old cabins.
The
underground
tour.
and some of the other stuff. And I thought, you were talking about some design standards, so I guess you'd want to say how much of the past history do you want to capture versus bringing something new in. So do we want to make it really historical in some ways because of the buildings that we are going to keep, and kind of get that flavor in one section, and then go to something a little bit more modern as we get toward the river and the restaurants, or do you keep it all historical? I don't know what the answer to that is.
I don't either. I just see, my idea of seeing it in the future is that it is reconnected back with downtown, because that is our, as Tony said, that is our original downtown. So it's one continuous connection. It's not that here's this part and here's downtown. This is downtown.
It's kind of like Old Town and downtown Portland, Old Town and New Town.
Well, no,
divided
not
by
even
Burnside.
Not even like that. More
but
like,
I mean, there is a big difference.
yeah,
between
but
the
more
two.
like, because what I see of that site, that is where Oregon City began. It really began down on that end, and the only reason they kind of abandoned it is because it kept flooding, and they kept moving further down, and then they moved up here. But it's where the heart and soul of our community began.
Yeah,
then-
that's a good point.
and then the other piece I want-
27 acres?
23.
23. What's the downtown, as we know it now, north of McLaughlin, what's that add up to? Do you have any idea?
I don't, but this would probably come, depends how you measure it.
Yeah.
Well,
You know,
if
but
it starts
it's
at
almost gonna
5th
double it.
and it goes to 10th, technically the old part of downtown, so you're adding,
4 more blocks back.
yeah, so you're adding really what the core of downtown.
Tony, could you put connection to the river down too? I don't know if we've done any of that, but
I
there is that
fingers.
Willamette River Greenway thingy.
Yeah.
But
And I see the heritage area being
Yeah.
implemented so that
Yeah.
it knits not only what we're doing together here, but it together with our partners in West Lynn, so that we all,
yeah.
look at the larger heritage area.
But I mean, any attempts at habitat restoration, preservation of petroglyphs on the rocks, that kind of thing. I mean, where that clarifier is, I see, a really nice open space, but
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody else sees a hotel, but
I don't see a hotel.
Viewing, I mean, that's.
Right.
I don't see a hotel there, but,
yeah.
You know what we ran
it'd be
into?
really noisy.
What we ran into with the clarifier was, let's just say we
Is it
decide.
empty now?
It will be.
Oh,
as
will
part,
be.
as
Okay,
part of
it
the
isn't empty
stormwater
yet.
management,
Okay.
is their NRI is going to come in, clean it out, and then open the plug in the bottom so the rainwater doesn't accumulate in it anymore. But part of when you think about that clarifier, because it's relatively new,
Yeah.
relative to other things on the site when it was constructed, and not that it can't be done, but whether it's public access for viewing, or do you do your cultural interpretation on top of it, or do you take it out for natural resource open space opportunity? And then the one thing is that we're pretty sure it was blasted into the basalt,
That's what I was going to ask you.
and so
How
then
was it
do you
put in?
recreate that?
It's a concert bowl.
Right. So
That's
yeah, I think that's one
that's
thing
what.
we've struggled with too. Is when you're looking at that, what do you do with this thing?
That could be your restaurant site, big dome.
I would think, though, that you could, I really think that you could put fill over it and create
The,
open space.
the space
Yeah,
needle.
yeah.
I mean,
There you go.
I suppose it would flood.
Totem poles.
It could flood.
Oh, heck
Totem
yeah.
Pole Plaza.
But, yeah.
I've got one harebrained idea I'd just like to throw out. I love the idea of extending Main Street and getting some connectivity, but we've got this huge obstacle with Highway 99.
Oh, I think McLaughlin
And,
Boulevard.
that Highway 99 just cuts right at the throat of that site.
Transportation is tricky.
If there was a way to put 99 below grade
Mhm.
at that point, and I know that would be a gigantic undertaking,
I think they're using that boring machine already in Seattle right now, so
You know,
it would be a while
I'm just saying if
before we could get it.
right at the point where 99 turns the corner and starts to head up the hill, if that could dive down enough that you could get Main Street to go straight across uninterrupted, I think that would do a huge, it would help that connectivity more than anything else. Even more than putting a
I think
bridge.
you'd have to draw that one for me because I'm not visually seeing that.
If you put a bridge over 99,
cow under
it still would not give you the
train.
connectivity that you'd have of a straight run of just.
We're putting all the parking garages against the cliff because we're going to have some parking for people.
I was just going to mention that. You're looking at a parking structure somehow, somewhere.
I do think that's realistic.
And I think the cliff, having it against the cliff side would help mitigate noise.
And I'll tell you what, I'll make a plug. This is one of the projects I'm working on right now. This is fantastic. It is so great, and this is where your residential comes in. We're building a project over in Tualatin, and we've got a 4-story parking garage, and then you build a 4-story apartment building around it. Guess what you don't see?
The parking structure.
You don't see the parking structure.
There you go.
Yeah, they did that in Lake Oswego too.
Yeah.
So all of your
you just wrap
all of your windows for the apartments are facing outward
Facing
and
out.
not inward.
and the parking garage would be up against the cliff.
That works well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I just had a thought though, because I've stood on the bluff up there and watched the floods. All this would be raised up, so or would it be? The plaza would be underwater at some point if we have floods, because it does flood quite often. And what would?
That's one of the challenges is
Yeah.
trying to understand the interaction between above the falls and below the falls, because we know in the 96 flood the Willamette backed up to about 50.7 feet, but we have the 96 inundation pictures. What it looked like happened is the water topped, came down the spur from above the falls and then back through the site, because there are parts of that site that are above 50.7 that were inundated. And so, yeah, that's...
But since then, there's been another kind of a flood where it really got backed up. What year was that?
96 was the bad one.
96 was the last big
Then
one.
there was another one where I've gone down and taken pictures when it didn't flood like it did then, but there was
Couple
still,
of years ago that happened.
it almost leveled up to the falls again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so
I
that,
remember when it
you know, and that's a challenge, you know, and that goes back to habitat restoration, it goes to public access, you know, it goes to what you take out of the site and what you keep on the site.
Well, it also-
and there may be, I mean, there are parks that flood and you don't use them during the flood event.
Well,
Exactly.
Talking about park every year.
it dictates what you can build on the ground level.
Right.
And so, you know, it probably means you don't put apartment building, store, or
On lower
apartments on the ground
Ground
level. You
floor,
have
no.
something on the ground level that can be flooded. You may not be desirable, but it's not going to wipe out somebody's house.
Yeah, it's why I live at 100 and my elevation is about 170 something. So if it makes it up my street, then you know we are in big trouble.
Well, I'll be safe up until 520 feet.
Yeah, you're higher than I am, but it's one of the things I was looking at when we had started getting the 96 flood. I was looking, I said, well, what elevation am I? I got the map and I looked, and I said, okay, I'm good.
My wife used to ask me about flooding, and I said, if it floods here, that's a bigger problem. It's a lot bigger problem than our property.
Where's the helipad go? There on the clarifier?
We're going to bring helicopters in, historic helicopters.
Are we giving you what you want, Tony?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is exactly what we're looking for, you know, the first kind of vision. And, you know, I think our job now with the consultant team is to really start to group and find some of these commonalities that we're hearing from folks and what we can build on from that.
The challenge, and I know as an architect, you know, you can try to squeeze too much on a site,
And then it just
and it
looks
sounds like 23 acres sounds like a lot
It's not.
until you start trying to dump everything on there.
Yeah.
I've developed much bigger sites than that, you know, 40, 50 acre sites.
You have to remember this is really 17,
Yeah,
of which
and-
part of that was flooded, so you're down to 10, 11.
You know, by the time you get a parking garage on there and you get, you know, a restaurant and a museum, and, you know, you can up half the site, you know, boom, just like that.
I think that's where the opportunity for that public access really helps this property because of the if you didn't have the falls, this is another mill site on a river.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's really
That's right.
utilizing that resource,
Not over here, they're about
not
to-
only because it
Clarify,
should
looks
be,
like a perfect place
you know,
for it.
because of the natural phenomenon that it is, and
yeah.
just this unique opportunity
Yeah, if we
to
don't-
connect the public back to this amazing
If we
river
don't
and
take
falls.
advantage of this, shame on us.
Mhm.
Really.
Tony, do you have any idea of all those, the picture that we're looking at right now, how many of those buildings are going to possibly preserved for historical?
No idea.
Any idea? Okay.
No.
Could
You know,
someone-
this is where it's difficult, because as Denise knows, when it comes to designating historic buildings, you need property owner consent. Not, are there other things that we can do? I mean,
What's a bank-
we still need to work through that, and without the direct ownership,
We have,
it's
don't have little say.
it's difficult. But
Well, and
we're
Frank-
creating that partnership so that we hope that we can convey the importance of these and the opportunities that are there. Let's just say Mill O, the wooden, really the only wooden structure on this site that that has a lot, that it's historically significant. It's in relatively good shape compared to the other things on there, and we do see a high reuse potential there. But that also was in that '96 inundation, and so we're trying to convey, and we convey this to the trustee, and we'll convey this to whoever buys it. But look, yeah, it may cost some to redevelop that
They have to make it
and
work.
retrofit it, but if you designate it, you can get a 20% tax credit on the construction costs of that. Plus, you're in the floodplain, and you get more flexibility to redevelop a building in the floodplain that's historically designated. So, you go in and demolish that building, you might not be putting anything back there. Just because there was something there before doesn't mean you get to put something back now. And between floodplain, Willamette River Greenway, our natural resource overlay district, public access desires, all those need to be weighed. And so this is an opportunity to use an existing structure, and that's that character that's already there. And there are ways to do that, and people do it. A lot of good developers do that all the time. So it's making sure that we understand the opportunities and the ramifications of decisions that are made.
Is any of this area considered possible urban renewal? Or is it all urban?
Certainly, I think everything's on the table.
Everything's open?
I think that would be one suggestion, would be to extend the urban renewal boundary. Take that in.
And I think that that's part of, we've brought Loci and Eco Northwest on as our business and financial consultants on this project. And, we've all sat through concept plans, and, you kind of cut and paste the local improvement district, urban renewal district, but we really push to them to really think of a good economic development strategy for this. Really pushing the market. We don't want another plan that sits on the counter and we all kick ourselves. In 10 years we revisit it again. There are market realities, and we want to understand those up front, because there's going to be what the private can bring, there's going to be what the public can bring, and there's going to be a gap. And how do we fill that gap? And that's just as important as whatever vision we come up for this property.
$5 million.
Tony, isn't there some way that you could plat that property to facilitate where buildings are going to be located, where traffic is going to be? It's got to be pedestrian friendly. It really does, because we're going to invite a lot of people in there to walk around and mill around.
Yep.
And if you could somehow parcel those pieces of property out to identify to the developer and to the public where these facilities are going to be located. You just can't do that unless you draw a line on a map.
You mean
That's why I was
like,
wondering how much the village
opportunity
would stay.
areas?
Sorry.
Yeah,
For-
yeah, but you do it with a plat, to make it permanent.
That's part of his concept plan, but that's also part of what I was asking, how much of that might stay or how much of it would.
So the problem, though, about that, I'll just throw this out,
The problem
and
with
what Bob just said, and I go back to what Tony said earlier. So there's a balance between how much structure you want to put into it and how much flexibility you want to allow. And if you get too structured, you limit the creative opportunities. And somebody that has the money available, and they have some interest in the property, could be discouraged if the plan is too rigid.
Yeah.
So I think there's a balance between having a design concept, a master plan concept, versus as you say, platting things out. Because when you get to that stage, now you've got lines on paper, and if somebody says, well, I'd like to do this instead, you've created some obstacles to that. So I think somewhere between having no guidelines and having a set plan, there's a middle ground that you're going to attract businesses to come in, developers to come in and say, I'm willing to do something creative here within the parameters that you've established.
Tony, at the city commission meeting when this was presented by the individuals, I can't remember it.
Walker Macy?
Right, and they were showing like some of their drawings of thoughts. Now that was just an early on drawing of things we could do before you go through all these conversations. Of
Right, because what we were finding was because of the complexity of the site, the density of the buildings that are existing on there, it's really hard to think of something else on the site. And so that was more a thought-provoking. We hired them to just come up with some ideas.
It was beautiful,
and it was more to be thought-provoking. It wasn't this is the plan. Right. It wasn't these are the uses. It was we're architects.
Possibilities.
We like to think outside the box. Here's an option.
What would be great to see is maybe the land without any of the buildings in one drawing, the land with the buildings that we like the best and the ones that are the most preservable in another drawing, and then maybe some other drawing that has everything or something like
Showing
that.
some infill.
So that you can see where all the places that we can fill in are and how this would all
what
take shape.
I'd recommend is we did a little bit of
like
that
idea.
under our due diligence work last summer, and we have our analysis online.
Yeah.
We looked at 3 scenarios in trying to get a handle on demolition and holding costs.
Yeah, like
and
what could you do if you just wiped
we
everything
looked
off the site?
We looked at a scrape. We looked at keep everything, and we looked at selective demolition. And so some of that is already available,
good,
but
okay.
more from a due diligence, holding cost.
Right.
We said, okay, we're going to have to hold this for 10 years as a public agency. What's it going to cost us to, stabilize roofs that haven't been worked on in 20 years? And, you got fall hazards out there. You got liability. You got security. You got graffiti.
Site.
You've got trespass. You've got stormwater management, environmental. You got 8 boilers on the property. You got asbestos site. I mean, there was a lot that we had to think about. Because it's not so much the takedown of the property, it's the next step.
Right.
That gets really expensive.
Well, and then hand in hand with that, you've got the reality of building codes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And as much as you'd love to hold on to some of those older buildings, the reality is, number one, they don't meet building code today. Fire, life safety, seismic, accessibility, energy. And the truth of the matter is, unless there's a lot of incentive, financial incentive, or an easy way to convert it to another use without having to do significant renovation, the cost of taking an old building and bringing it up to current code can actually cost more than knocking it down and building a new building.
Tony, I think
Not
what he
in terms
just said
of
right there.
sustainability and building green.
Well, I mean, it's a challenge, and I work with one of the guys that's he's the owner of our building, and he's dedicated to historic renovation. John Russell. We did a major renovation of 2 of his buildings, and we're actually working on another one right now.
Is he moving that along with the 3rd one?
Well, we're doing another deal. So, the truth of the matter is, one of the buildings that we helped him rebuild when it came right down to it, he could have knocked it down and built a new building there for less than what he spent on it to renovate it, to bring it back to historic.
Yeah, I mean, they could have done that with the Crater Lake Lodge too, but.
And so there has to be,
did.
there has to be some incentive, and some of the incentive can be from a marketing standpoint, the image of the building. Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. And the lodge is a good example of that. You build a different building there, it's not going to be the lodge.
Right.
But the developer has to see that vision. And that's where I think maybe this process can help people to see the vision.
Yeah.
You get somebody like Walker Macy or somebody in there that says, hey, we got a couple buildings here that have great potential. And one of the things we often do with our clients is we just go out and get pictures and we say, we could make that building look like this. We don't even spend any time redesigning the building. We just say, this is the image of that building. So that, along with some tax incentive, like Tony was saying, you get some tax incentive for renovating a historic building, especially if it's in the floodplain. Those things, as the study goes forward, you can say, well, there's these 4 buildings here that really have some historic significance, and they're an opportunity to do that too. And I think what Paul was talking about, narrow down the site to the buildings that really have that potential, and then see what you can do with the rest of the site.
And it was interesting when we did our work over the due diligence work. We had George Kramer who with the historical side of it, and I can't draw a blank. We had some architects involved as well, and what we found was not only let's take the Holly building, the 4-story building at the very southern end of the property, and right next to it is Paper Machine 1, and then there was like this old metal framework that was put up to hold one of the tanks. And we looked at, okay, let's knock everything else down around it, keep the Holly building. But then, in some of that structure, even though it's modern, relative, built in the 50s, relative to when the Holly building was built, but you could utilize that for your HVAC, your elevator, your access, and you don't have to put that inside of the building itself and utilize that space a little bit. So when you start looking at what some of the benefits of some of the existing infrastructure around these historic buildings and how those can be utilized to meet some of that fire life safety, because it is difficult, to take the Holly building, which is a limited square footage, and then all of a sudden you're busting in elevator shafts and what, you just take away from the usable space of it. But if you can utilize something around that, it goes towards that reuse. So you're almost looking at a cluster. So there's a lot that needs to go into thinking about the existing building structure, infrastructure that's there, and how it can be utilized most efficiently.
Right, and that's where that creativity element comes in, is how can you maximize the use of those buildings that are worth salvaging and then blend it with the new construction.
Right.
There's a coal plant that used to supply coal to the city of Spokane that has been turned into a mixed-use building, and I toured it when I was at the Trust Conference in Spokane. And one of the things that they did is that because they had these elevator shafts that went up and down with pulleys that brought the coal up, that fired the steam and so forth, they were able to utilize those to put the elevators in. So the elevators that take you to the different levels of the building are utilizing a system that was already in place. And so this guy, he's from Spokane, and he's always looked at that building, but it's huge. It is huge. There's a brewery in it. There's offices in it. There's community space in it. I mean, it is a major multi-use building, and it's right next to the tracks because that's where the coal cars came and dumped the coal into this building that supplied, as I said, the coal that heated and cooled the city of Spokane. And and everybody told him to tear it down. But he had a vision, and he had some people who helped him, and the community helped him articulate it, and now it's a major centerpiece. And you can go in there, and he left some of the machinery. So there's places where there's big belts that go up, and this big, I don't know what the big wheel is, but pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of thing, if you can maximize what's here, not necessarily save everything, but save the stuff that's got some potential, and then you're incorporating the historic element into the new stuff, and that's where your design standards come in. You say, well, everything that you build new has to work with the old stuff. It doesn't have to necessarily match it, but it has to work with it.
Well, part of,
Sorry.
sorry, Tom, go ahead.
I was just thinking, and we were talking creatively, I was just thinking, this may be totally naive because we're trying to recapture the falls and essence of them, but I was wondering, is there any way the falls, some of the falls can be used to help with sustainable power to that area? I'm not sure of all the directions where the water goes through, and I wonder if there's any turbines in there that could be used to even show people that we're using some of the river water to power some of this.
Maybe, yeah, I think it's certainly an opportunity, and I think, one of the things we also saw, it's interesting as people hear about this, you hear about other studies that students have done and whatnot, and one of them was utilizing, how do you reintroduce water to the site through the historic mill races and tail races that exist that are blown into the basalt. Can you utilize some of that water for water features on the site? Yeah, and there's also other sustainable uses, whether it be gray water, I think that's all an opportunity.
Bob's Red Mill.
Have to think of it.
Yeah, right. I don't want to rain anybody's parade, but ultimately you're going to have to service that piece of property with utilities and infrastructure, and to do so, you're going to have to either dedicate public right-of-way, or you're going to have private streets that the developer's going to have to maintain. But in any regard, you're going to have to draw lines on a piece of paper and say, this is where a street and a water main's going to go. And getting back to the platting of it, you're going to have to parcel that property out for building sites. And you're going to start at the ground and work up. So there's where you're going to have to be creative to give options. But
and I think as we refine these plans, it's kind of like the concept plan. You start with kind of where do we need to connect, and then you just keep building on that until you get to the detail. And honestly, when you look at it, not a lot of ways to slice this one. I mean,
it's very narrow.
When you look at the old plat,
Yeah.
it's hard. I mean, it looks like it fits, but not to say that that's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're going to get those, you're going to have to get in and out, and you got a light. You're somewhat fixed, right? And you're kind of fixed at that point. And there's not a lot of other opportunities. But then you get into your view sheds and your connectivity back to the river. And you want to make sure that happens, that you don't end up with some super block. So I mean, I think that those are going to come out organically, because there's not a lot of ways, honestly, in my opinion, to slice this thing up.
I'm not saying these problems can't be solved. They can. It's just
at some point, it has
sequence
to
of things. Where do they come in sequence?
Right.
But you're going to also look at the public safety factor in terms of, are you going to put a substation in there for fire, or is everything going to be sprinkled? Right. But I can bet you that Fire District Number 1 is going to take a real interest in this.
Because they have to get out. That's where my turnaround idea comes in, get their turnaround.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, one of the things with the current code, if it's residential, it's going to have to be fire sprinkled.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I can hear now the
That's
youth
by
are going to
code
want
now.
that what's that round building called again? The clarifier. They're going to want a skate park there.
Hot tub,
Yeah.
viewing deck, I've heard of that. So I think, like I said, I appreciate the thoughtful comments tonight. This is exactly what we're looking for in this part of this public engagement. And like I said before, as Planning Commission and City Commission, we are going to be coming back to you more frequently for updates on this as we're going through this, just so everyone knows where we're at. And just a little bit of the structure is, we've identified stakeholders. We're going out and meeting these groups. Brown bags up at Metro, throughout the region. We have quite a bit of regional support right now. The mayor has been working with Councilor Collette. We actually got a letter from MPAC, so all the mayors in the region. Washington County is very excited about this. We actually had their city managers out on a tour last week. So I think it's just trying to build that regional support for this project, which also means, though, that we are engaging the whole region in our public outreach. So there's going to be events in Oregon City. There's going to be events in Portland. I mean, we're going to bounce these things around, just trying to build that large stakeholder base and taking ownership in this project to help push it along. On the 27th at the First City Celebration, this Saturday, we have the mayor, The city manager, Councilor Collette, and Commissioner Ludlow from the county are going to be speaking at the event at about 6:45, kind of the cutting the ribbon.
PM or AM?
PM, 6:45 PM.
Well, thank you.
In between two bands, kind of kicking this thing off. So that's another opportunity to come hear them speak. It'll be quick because they have a very limited amount of time that they get to speak. So.
What date was that again, Tony?
This
Saturday.
Saturday.
the 27th.
This Saturday.
This Saturday.
Downtown Oregon City.
Yeah, we have another conference going on. I mean, OCTA is followed up by the Civil War Conference of the First Oregon Maine group that's putting this on. So
And so I have some a feedback form here that hopefully you guys will take some time to just kind of think through and answer those questions, and feel free to send them in to me, and we'll get them all put together. And do visit the site, the website, rediscoverthefalls.com. We're going to be updating that quite a bit. Get the Twitter feed, get on Facebook. We're really just trying to make sure we engage people.
I don't think anything on the West Coast surpasses this in terms of the potential.
Scappoose has some hot things.
Is anything happening on the West Coast?
Scappoose.
I think that's probably one of the hottest things.
Yeah.
Tony, have you thought about it? Just happen to think about this. I mean, I know this is volunteers, but every one of those concerts, I'm wondering if it wouldn't help to hand out some flyers to people to go look at this website. 'Cause there's a lot of people there who probably don't even know about this, or they don't
Good idea.
participate in neighborhood associations. They're sparse in those. But maybe just having a small flyer that some of us go, that we can hand out to people to be aware of this, and go look on the website, and this is what's participate. Come
Great
on.
idea. We may
even a half sheet.
We may end up with a booth there as well.
if you have some, we could put some at our snow cone booth, which is where everybody keeps coming.
Right? Yeah.
I don't, because you don't have alcohol.
We have
You don't do
we have
snow
little business cards with the logo on it, and the Rediscover the Willamette Falls on it.
I'm waiting for the T-shirt.
Which we've blown through, so we will get more to you soon. And I just want to show you this is as part of the our
Nice.
the little line through the T's on Willamette is supposed to be a lamprey eel, and the little circles on the other side of the Legacy Project are saw blades.
Oh.
I like
That's why I said we're waiting for the T-shirts.
The T-shirts.
Yes,
Yeah.
for the planning commission, we want
Like on
special
the back of a
T-shirts.
baseball shirt.
Yeah, it's nice.
Zach already said that
really-
we need that.
So with that, I kind of in respect to everyone's time, I mean, we can certainly, like I
that's-
said, spend a lot of time on this, but this was a
Great
very
kickoff.
start.
Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
kickoff. Thank you.
Good. I like this.
All right.
This was good.
So,
But next time for Melody, we might want to sit up there so for the microphone.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you like the more informal.
No, this is
Yeah.
good.
I like this.
This is
I
a
think
better
we'll-
way
I
to
think
have
we'll-
it.
We'll work on this.
The only thing would be better if we had couches. You know.
better microphones. Well, are we adjourned?
If you say so.
We're adjourned.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tony,